Do you remember when every game was Minecraft? That time around 5 or 6 years ago that saw an influx of pixels and voxels and, well, lazy visual development in the games industry? Out of those games, very few were good, and many of them were practically crimes against humanity. One of the few good ones, however, was a promising little title called Cube World, an open world sandbox adventure RPG that's been in alpha for quite a long time now. It was released in public alpha in 2013, though has since been taken down from sale as of July 2015. Cube World is a game that has the player explore a procedurally generated world consisting of towns, dungeons, mountains, rivers, and other landmarks that span across different biomes with different creatures and enemies scattered across the place. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I want to play some Roblox Zelda-ass looking game? Well, there's a little more to Cube World than first meets the eye. Even though it's a little bit of an unfinished mess, Cube World still has a pretty solid foundation for a game that has loads of potential. Cube World's gameplay is pretty simple for the most part. You run around exploring the map looking for things to kill so that you can level up and get new gear to kill more things and explore more of the map and get better gear, and you get the gist of it. It's a pretty standard RPG in that the gameplay is based around leveling up and collecting or crafting new gear, and you have a pretty standard progression of fighting more and more difficult enemies as you collect more and more worthwhile loot. There's no real guideline. Well, there's no tutorial at all. You're just sort of thrown into this world, and from there you figure out what the hell it is you have to do. The class system is pretty well fleshed out. You can play as a warrior, mage, ranger, or a rogue, and they all have their own distinct abilities and playstyles. Each class also has 2 different subclasses, which both have their own distinct abilities and perks as well. The combat has been developed and designed well. It is challenging and engaging enough to keep it interesting, even if it does get a little repetitive. The engagingness of the combat really does help you push through the more grindy aspects of the game. Cube World also features a day-night cycle, which I find sort of limits your progression. You won't stray too far away from the starting town for fear of being caught out in the dark, as you can speak to an innkeeper in town at night to instantly progress to the next morning. You're also able to tame animals that wander around the map with their favourite food, which definitely isn't that easy to figure out most of the time. Nonetheless, pets provide an extra hand in combat, and many of them can be ridden as well, to help traverse the landscape much faster. The game is a long way off being finished, and certainly needs a bit of a polish. There are lots of things that just need to be fixed completely, like the crafting system, which at the moment is a little painful. Exploration is a big part of this game, and it falls into the classic procedurally generated pitfall. It gets a little bit old quite quickly. After a while, you've seen everything the game really has to throw at you, and there's not quite enough variance to keep it exciting for long. Cube World does give you some extra incentive to explore, however, as it gives players access to hang gliders and boats, as well as the aforementioned ability to ride your pets, all of which are, however, initially locked behind a level up system. I'd say it'd make more sense if these different methods of transport had their own progression trees, and weren't locked behind a level up system, as I feel it kinda hinders your actual character's progression in combat at the beginning of the game. The pet riding could surely be locked behind the progression system for your pet, no? The class system needs a bit of a rebalance as well, as certain classes are really overpowered. The water mage is pretty much broken at this stage. Boss fights could also do with a bit of a rework. As it stands, they're basically just slightly stronger normal enemies that can have a shit ton of health. You can be fighting these guys for like half an hour sometimes. Cube World just really feels like it needs a little more flavour. Perhaps each playable race should have their own specific perks and bonuses rather than just changing your character's appearance. And perhaps the class and ability trees could be branched out a little more. The NPCs that walk around the map and towns really don't do anything for you except for the shopkeepers. And they all have what I like to call Starbound syndrome, where they only have one line of dialogue. From the updates that lead developer Wale has been posting on his Twitter account over the last few years, the game really does look like it's coming together. But the last post on his Twitter is from over a year ago, so that's not exactly reassuring. Visually, the game looks alright, I guess. Look, it's a voxely, pixely, Minecrafty based game. It's never going to be the most amazing thing you've ever seen, but it does the style pretty well. The player and creature models all look pretty damn good, and are definitely quite fitting for the style and genre of game that Cube World is. You can definitely see it drawing inspiration from old school JRPGs. The environments are pretty interesting, as are the buildings and structures around the place. The big issue is that they're all a little same. Most notably is the dungeons and castles dotted around the place. They all look pretty much exactly the same for each biome, and they really could do with a few more layouts and colour palettes to keep it a little more fresh and interesting. There's no music playing in the background at all in this game, which is a bit of a shame. A game like this could definitely use a nice soundtrack, a track for each biome, a dungeon track, a combat track, all that good stuff. The game has plenty of audio cues for charging up attacks or when you take critical hits or when an enemy dies, as well as an incredibly loud level up audio cue, but it's all really neither here nor there. It's fitting and does the job, I guess. There were definitely some things that I particularly liked about the overall style of Cube World, most notably how enemies sort of dissolve into pixels when they die, which is a kinda cool little feature. Overall, the aesthetic of the game is pretty good, but just needs a little more variance and definitely needs a banging soundtrack to play in the background. As it stands, Cube World has that something special. It charms you, it draws you in with its infinite and exciting world, but then you pretty quickly realise how unfinished it is. There's plenty of room for features to be polished and plenty more room for new features to be added in, however. This game really does have the potential to be something big, something really enjoyable with tons of replay value and plenty of incentive to play with your friends. But at this stage, it's a fair way off of that. And to say that it will ever reach that point is uncertain. The game has not changed in 5 years, it's not even available for sale at the moment. You can only play it if you bought it during the 2 years it was available in alpha. It's important to remember that this is being developed by 2 people, and these people almost certainly have jobs and other life commitments to attend to. You can't expect a development team of 2 people who can't work on the game full time to rush out a title of this scale in a couple of years. And I'd argue that it's good that they're taking their time with it, so to speak. I'd rather see this game be nurtured and reach its true potential before we see it fully released. It's also important to remember that this review is of the game in its current alpha state. If there is an update or a 1.0 release, I will be more than happy to re-review. And while this game might look abandoned, don't be too surprised if we see Cube World make a resurgence sometime in the future. But Wale, if it does, just make sure you do this, okay? Bat. Do it.